This week's Monday Night Raw was hectic in the extreme, with a number of late additions to the card as well as a lot of rematches and a lot of people doing double duty. With news on another tag team breakup, a developing feud between Drew McIntyre and Keith Lee, and the reason that next week's card is already looking stacked, this is your Monday Night Raw review. Let's start the way Raw started, with Randy Orton coming out to cut a promo essentially saying he deserves his shot against Drew McIntyre. And where is Drew McIntyre? Well, Drew drives an ambulance back into the arena, beats the hell out of Randy Orton, and over the course of the night would deliver 3 Claymore kicks to Randy Orton, which is an answer to the 3 punt kicks that were given 2 weeks ago to Drew McIntyre. A key part of this storyline is later in the night when Randy Orton has a rematch with Keith Lee, which Keith Lee loses by DQ because Drew McIntyre can't help but get involved. It looks like there is a match brewing between Keith Lee and Drew McIntyre because Drew McIntyre just keeps getting involved. Before that though, we do have Clash of Champions where Randy Orton will be facing off against Drew McIntyre one more time. Randy Orton, as you might expect when the favour is returned, leaves in an ambulance and goes to a hospital, not a local medical facility. It's like the WWE are finally aware that people are really mocking them for that particular phrase. Our opening match is another 6-man tag between Ricochet, Cedric Alexander and Apollo Crews versus the Hurt Business. The big character development here though is that this is the night of Cedric Alexander, who turns heel as it were during the match, attacks Ricochet, who bounces like an insane person as you might expect, attacks Apollo Crews and joins the Hurt Business. Later in the night we would have a formal announcing of Cedric Alexander. He would be cutting a promo as part of the Hurt Business, and this would result in an 8-man tag match with the Viking Raiders making up the numbers on the face side. The match would be hectic, the match would be very fast paced, would also feature an injury for Ivar, who is apparently okay after just receiving a bit of a stinger. He will be checked out for injury and he will likely be given time to rest. The end of the match, however, results in Cedric Alexander picking up a spike Michinoku driver victory over Ricochet, even though Ricochet does manage to kick out. It does look like the referee just called that one. A good night for Cedric Alexander, a huge night for him in terms of character development. We will see how this goes forwards for the Hurt Business, who continue to grow and dominate. During the night we also have another rematch, which is the Street Profits versus Andrade and Garza, which goes exactly how every Street Profits versus Andrade and Garza match has gone. Garza essentially walks out on Vega and Andrade, the Street Profits pick up the win. There's an interesting little pseudo botch here, where Montez Ford is so excited after hitting his frog splash that while pinning Andrade he rotates him almost entirely, and the ref has to finish his free count by counting 2 and then changing position because he can't see the shoulders. Good refereeing, not a great moment for Montez Ford, who looked very confused afterwards. After the match here, Cesaro and Nakamura, the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, come down to the ring and lay out a challenge for the Street Profits, champion versus champion, next week on Raw. Next week's Raw does also compete with the return of Monday Night Football, so the WWE are trying to really stack that card. After another segment featuring R-Truth and Ninjas, which I will not be discussing, we have Billie Kay versus Peyton Royce in a singles match won by Peyton Royce. Royce then hugs Billie Kay after the match, which clearly shows there isn't any real definitive feud here. There is lots of rumour about Peyton Royce being the subject of a big push coming up. We will probably be seeing that in the coming weeks, but when it comes to a big push, there's only so high she can go when we've got Asuka, Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax at the top of the division. She would struggle to break into that, but I wish her all the best in trying. It looks like Billie Kay may be taking some time away from the WWE, at least for a little while. The entire Mysterio family come down to the ring. Buddy Murphy joins them, but via big screen, and challenges Dominic Mysterio to yet another street fight. Dominic accepts. The whole thing should have taken that long, but it actually took about 20 minutes. The WWE announced that next week we will see Asuka versus Mickie James for the Raw Women's Championship. As I previously mentioned, that is the return of Monday Night Football and they are trying to stack the card. To build up to that, tonight we had Asuka and Mickie James against Natalya and Lana, which was an okay match, which Asuka eventually won, teasing more dissension between the two, but they're not a tag team, so you're trying to really force a storyline here. Why can't they just be two talented wrestlers who want to fight? Kevin Owens enters Raw Underground for his match against Aleister Black. He makes sure to have a quick conversation with Shane McMahon right outside the door, and I really respect that he never lets anything go. Shane McMahon tries to suggest it's all water under the bridge. Kevin Owens does not trust him for a moment. Nor should he. Nor should technically anyone trust him either. A lot of betrayals in wrestling. Black vs Owens happens over 3 separate segments with matches in between, which really show how pre-recorded this actually is. While it's actually a very good technical wrestling match, there's real limitations as to what both men can do. Aleister Black can't do anything high-flying, for example, so it becomes a very ground and pound, something Black is very good at, but which Kevin Owens maybe is not that experienced with. The match is won by Dabba-Kato. Wrestling? To further push the women's tag team title feud, both Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax compete in successive handicap matches against their opponents, which, if that doesn't define down the Riot Squad, I don't know what does. Admittedly, via distractions and a little bit of cheap roll-up, Liv Morgan does pin Shayna Baszler. Big moment for Liv Morgan. Liv Morgan also looks like she's about to pin Nia Jax, however that is interrupted by Retribution, who, instead of attacking the women in the ring, take over the Thunderdome, put their own new logo on it, and speak for the first time. The 2 speakers, Mercedes Martinez and Dominik Dijakovic. This is a clear sign that Retribution now finally being given an actual storyline to be getting into. Retribution, when it was first pushed, was more of an idea than a coherent storyline, but they have very much reached the point now where they know where they're going with them. It's just a shame that I don't feel, with the NXT talent involved, they'll be particularly recognisable to a lot of the Raw and SmackDown audience, so it might not get the big reveal they're hoping for. The main event is Dominic Mysterio versus Buddy Murphy in a street fight, and it is a very high quality street fight indeed. There is good use of weaponry, good use of athleticism, including Dominic Mysterio sliding to the outside into a sunset bomb onto a table. Great work from Murphy in selling the move and positioning his body as required. Both men do really well, to the point that I think when you take out some of the storyline elements, this was probably on paper a better street fight than against Seth Rollins at SummerSlam. Seth Rollins, however, is not present this week, and the Mysterio family joined together to beat Buddy Murphy down with kendo sticks to end the night. Weird moment, kind of intense. I wouldn't necessarily say feel good, because I feel Buddy Murphy is kind of moving towards face here, but maybe that was the beginning of this because it felt very conclusive. That is the shortest Raw review I've ever done. This week's Raw progressed a lot of feuds, but we did see a lot of things stacked back to back. The women's scene is a bit of dead in the water this week, with the first tag match unnecessary, and then later on, both of the handicap matches, sort of a means to an end. There wasn't much in way of character development outside of Royce versus Kay, which we'll see how that goes in the future. When it comes to the tag division, it's a stunning negative to the Raw tag division that they feel the need to bring the SmackDown tag champions over to pop a rating on Raw. The idea was, when this brand versus brand invitational happened, that all shows would benefit, but really Raw is the only show to have received any benefit whatsoever so far. That said, the in-ring action was very good, even though we had a lot of repeat performances, a lot of high flying and a lot of athleticism on display, a very conclusive finish as well, and a real heating up of the McIntyre versus Orton feud, now that Orton is no longer targeting legends and is actually targeting Drew McIntyre. My Twitter poll for this week's show gave it a 39% good, followed by a 31% okay rating. I agree here, this was a good show. Not great, because no real particular moment stands out and will live long in the memory and stand the test of time. However, there was plenty of character development. Cedric Alexander in particular got about a month's worth of character development in one night, so it's very good for him, and also a show that potentially really does focus on new stars. Liv Morgan looked great, Alexander looked great, Peyton Royce looked great, and as you might expect from here, Keith Lee continues to look great. That's been the Monday Night Raw review. I've been Tom Colahue, and thank you for joining me.